Welcome to another computing video with Dr. D. This is the second Forms app in C# using Visual Studio. And today what I want to do is to start by showing you a basic algorithm. You can see here on the screen what I drew on a whiteboard. Now on the top left here you can see the tile carpet calculator. The idea of the app is that we're going to program an app for someone who might install tiles or lay carpets in your home. So we're going to say do it for 4 rooms, and I can talk about how you can do it for as many rooms as you like. We're going to assume the rooms are, rectangular, so they have a length and a width, and we're going to calculate the cost of each of the rooms and total them up and get the overall cost for a customer. And so this will give a quote for a customer for their tile or carpet installation. You can add other things to this app, but you can see here we're going to have a picture box showing carpets, and if you select tiles, which is shown here with a checkbox, then under the carpet picture box, the checkbox for tiles, if you check that, you're laying tiles, you're not laying carpet. Cost is, which is just a label which can change, and you can have a label with the ultimate total cost. You have a button to calculate the cost. You have a few inputs here, text inputs, text boxes that you will add to the form. You have other labels here for each one of the rooms, a length and width label, and you could add a customer name in case later on you are going to save these quotes to a file. Now let's do the tile and carpet calculator, which is also the title up here. Let's lay a title there. It could be, the title itself could be another image or a picture, but it's simply a label in this case. You can see here I've labeled that label, text box, and so on. Now I've written a basic algorithm for our program. Now an algorithm is your kind of logical schema, logical layout of how your program might work. So on the right hand side I've declared all the variables that I'm going to use. We talked about them earlier on in other programs. We're going to use tile cost. Now I've said 112, 40, 85, 70. It doesn't really matter if I follow these through exactly. Well, it would, I suppose, if I'm meant to be following my algorithm precisely, but I'm making all variables here. I've said I'm making them float. I could make them decimal, or I could make them double. I actually think making them double might be better. I can also round them off later on, the cost. Obviously, if we're going to be looking at dollars and cents, makes sense to round off my decimal numbers to 2 decimal places. I haven't actually said that here. What I have said is I'm going to use float for area, float for cost, tile cost, etc. They're going to be internally programmed, all variables set to float, and I'll have I need to convert what we input into our text boxes. So text1 dot text will be converted to a number for length 1, width 1, convert to a number text box 2, text box 3, etc. And then we continue on with that for width 2, line length 3, width 4, blah blah, etc., etc. They all have the same kind of conversion. But in C# we have to use a bit of code. We actually write down our code here, convert to single, and then we'll have bracket text box 1 dot text. So we, instead of convert to number. In an algorithm, of course, we can use basically a form of English called structured English, which gives us our algorithm or pseudocode here in structured English. And when we click our button down here, what we're going to do is do all of our calculations. So the area needs to be calculated for the room. So the area will be the length and the width times the width of the first room, plus the second room, plus the third room, plus the fourth room. And then if the check box is checked, which means we're laying tiles, then the cost will be the time, the area times tile cost, or it will be the cost equals area times the carpet cost, um, which was laid down over here, tile cost, carpet cost. Now, that should say carpet cost, I guess, but anyway, it's a very rough algorithm or pseudocode, if you like. And then I'm going to put the cost here, the total cost, in label 8. Now, label 8 would be down here when I said label 8. Down in the bottom of our form. So what I'm going to do now is to start up Visual Studio, and I'll come back and we'll start laying out the form. So I'd like you to start by opening up Visual Studio if you want to follow along with my programming. And we will start by laying out the form. We'll we'll set up our project, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So open up Visual Studio and come back. So I've got rid of my algorithm image. You can see here I've opened up Visual Studio. I'm going to start a new project, create a new project, and it'll give me my recent projects. I might have told you before, if you followed through with the slideshow, our first Forms app, I use Windows Forms app .NET framework, and if you did that app, you'll see .NET framework here for Windows Forms app. And if you haven't done it, you might have to type in Windows Forms, and you can then search for it, and there it is down there, .NET Framework, C#. That's the one you're selecting. Let's just continue on. We're going to give it a name. I'm going to call it carpet underscore tile 2023. And it will go in our normal location, our username, source, repos, Carl, type it 2023, Carl, right, carpet tile. And we will place solution and project in the same directory. We can do that. It's going to do that anyway, I believe, anyway, but we'll just let it sit there. Now, we'll actually, yeah, these are kind of buried inside that directory. We can have a look at that another day. It uses the latest version of .NET Framework here. So we create our project. It'll take a moment for Visual Studio to start that. So here we have Windows Forms app open. I want a slightly larger form than I've got here, and we should lay out what we want here. So it says Form 1, obviously. If you remember last time, I like to control some of these properties. The text on the form says Form 1. I want to say it is tile and carpet calculator, tile and carpet calculator up the top there. Now the control test, the foreground color you can see there. We can have, I suppose, control of some of the other colors, the background of the actual form. Perhaps I'll change that to a slightly different color. I like to use the web colors, you might remember. And what would be a good, maybe a nice kind of pastel color here. So I'm going to bring in a button. Now this is our calculate button, obviously. So let's just, we click on the button and then just bring the cursor over and click it into the form. We can change the color of a button as well, so we can do that with our button here, the background image or the background color. We can change here, and I can change the text on the button, which was calculate cost. And so under the text, what's on the button, design name, no, we want text, might be up here. Text button 1, so we'll go calculate cost. Might also change the size of the font. So I'm just taking my time today going through this for you. You can do it in your own pace. I recommend you pause the videos as you go through them. Microsoft Sans Serif, you might prefer a different type of font on that. Sans Serif fonts are usually better. Otherwise you get kind of curly edges fade away in non in serifed fonts. So we can have a large calculate cost button. We had that down to the bottom right here. Perhaps might have it under the text boxes. Now we also had a nice label, which was our heading, and we can place the label up the top. And our heading said my tile carpet calculator. So we'll find our text here, label 1, and we can say Dr. D's carpet and tile calculator. And once again, we can change our font, and we could change our size of the font. For a heading like this, we could use something a little more dramatic and pick a much larger size. Let's see how we go across the screen here. Okay. You might even change the... Oh, I didn't like my ampersand. Okay. What about a slash like that? Probably like to center the text. Good idea. And perhaps give it a bit more color. Probably a nice blue here would work. Obviously, choosing the colors, you try and get some type of color theme that is vaguely consistent with usually with your business case or chosen colors for your business. Let's just keep it nice and clean. Now, there's a lot more labels I need. I need a whole lot of labels that say room 1, room 2, room 3, room 4, and then I need the length and the width, and I also need text boxes. So let's first of all get to a text box. And down here we can see a text box, just a basic text box. And we'll click that there, giving plenty of room for the label to go next to it and the labels to go above it. Now, when I get a text box of this type, we can change the font size in the text box. The font size is going to control the size of the text that's entered. And we want it to be large and clear for our users. So I'm using a size of 12 here. And if I position this text box and then I decide to copy it, and I need 8 of them. So I'm just going to paste them in order so that, and you notice how the line lines them up for me. So that's quite helpful. And then I'll paste another one in. Just Control V, and you can see how we're getting some assistance here from Windows to help us line everything up. And I can do that with a third one. Third room, as it turns out to be, and the fourth one as well. It doesn't look too bad. So what I'll do now is add some labels, and I'll just add a label. And what I'm going to do here is just show you how we're going to do each of the labels. So here you can see that first label that I've made for the room, where I've changed the properties over here on the right. And I better just get that from behind my image. That's a bit strange. Okay. And so I'm going to again, I've got that in 12 point. In the same way as I copied the text boxes where they're text box 1, 2, 3, 4 in order, I'm doing that on purpose so that the calculations are easy to work out. 5, 6, 7, and 8. So room 1 will be text box 1 times text box 2, which is the length and the width. Now, I don't need to use the labels for calculating, so I can simply copy one label and then I can paste them in and use that copied label for all the other labels that I need. Getting to the final label, which would be label here, 4 down and 2 across for length and width, and then a total cost for, well, to show us down the bottom what the total cost is. I could use a text box for the outcome at the end, or I can use a label. Because I don't have to enter text, there's no need to use a text box. It's just adding junk to the screen, really. We can do that just as easily with a label. But let's just press Control C on this label and start pasting it in a few times. I think 5, 6. So we said 1 here for the total cost. We'll need 1 for the width of the room and the length of the room. Room 4. All right, so obviously that's room 1 up there, room 2, so I can simply go over here with properties, room 2, room 3, room 4, and again up the top I can then change that to the width of the room. Well, I've got length times width. I'll just look at my algorithm here. It looks like, yes, we say length times width, don't we? So length times width. You will notice I moved the width label across so it isn't really above the text box. Perhaps I'll move the length across too. You might get the idea of what I'm trying to do here. I'm thinking I'll move all of these text boxes together. And down here, we know this is the total cost, so we can write that in as well. And then I can have another label next to it, or I can use the same label and I can change the size of that label. But I could move all the labels together, the text boxes together, or I can grab them like this. Now, there's a couple of ways to move them. I can just move them across like this so it lines up nicely like that, or I can go even further and have them there That looks pretty good. I can use arrows, so if you notice, I can press an arrow key a few times to shift them across or back, up and down, and position them. The reason I wanted them across there was because, of course, I do know that it is a good idea to give myself room to put a picture there. And also, we thought we'd have a customer name up the top that we may or may not use if we're saving the data to a file at some point in time. Now, this 12 point doesn't seem to quite cut it for the final answer, so I assume I should change the size of this from 12 to maybe 14. I've got 14 in the button, makes sense. And perhaps the customer name can also be similar. Does it make more sense to use that? I'll do this one. So we'll go up here, we'll make this customer name. Let's get down to the text. And well, I haven't done any coding yet. I haven't even saved our project. So to save our project, we press the double save button there, save all button. And I will need another text box here. I can simply copy a text box if I want. Might make it have similar dimensions to or layout to the other text boxes. I may need a longer text box here for our customer name. Names can be quite long, often are even. And we can, I mean, it really is just a bit of fairy floss on the top, isn't it? We're not really using the custom name in the code I'm about to write, but nevertheless, it seems to make some sense to have that on the form. I need an image box now, or a picture box, because I'm going to put a picture on the screen, and I'm going to change that because we're going to have a button here that also allows us to select tiles. So are we actually laying tiles, or are we going to be laying carpet? So let's put a picture box in. We can just put this over here. I happen to know that my images are kind of more wide than high. And we'll start out assuming that we've got carpet, and if I choose an image that just goes in the box in the I haven't got a local resource set up, which I could do. Well, I'm in a project resource file, which goes in resources, project resources, and I do know that I have. Okay, I put those there, but funnily enough, I've got these other ones I'm using today in a different area. Um, so I'm going to be using a carpet image that I used earlier. I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to tell it. Notice here there's a few different size modes. You've got normal, which just puts the image in as it is, or I can stretch it or auto size it. Often it's good to just stretch it to the full size of your picture box there, because what that means is that when I put another image in there, it will not change the size of the picture box, which is what I personally like to do. You can certainly change around those modes as you wish. Um, this is just a piece of carpet I found lying around, so don't criticize my image, find one of your own. I'm using my own images because I don't want to breach anyone's copyright by stealing images and showing them online, which I think is good practice. So now we'll get into some code. So I'm going to, well, first of all, I need to have the select tile button, don't I? So let's just get there first. We haven't said whether we're doing tiles or carpets, and I guess we can argue about where we're going to have that. Certainly, I know that I need a checkbox for that, and I'm going to grab a checkbox here, and I'm going to put it here somewhere, just so we can. So I think my computer's running a bit out of memory, but never mind. I've got the checkbox there, and I am going to change the text to check if tiles, and I guess I should have a capital C. Also, I probably should change the font size to be consistent with the others, which are 12s. I think we can put that sort of somewhere in the middle, or maybe line up with the first, line up with the text in the button, or you can decide that yourselves, but I'm going to have it there. And I'm going to get into the coding now. So I do that by you check well, your button, open it up, and you can see here our code. So everything pretty much goes in one button in this program. And so let's first of all lay out our variables, and then we'll get to our simple calculation code, which I showed you before in the pseudocode in the algorithm. So I'll do that and pause your viewing, and you'll see me in a moment. Here I've entered my first variable, float width 1, convert to single. It's converting a floating number. Well, it's converting the text box 1.text into a float. Now, a float allows decimal numbers, so you need to use float, decimal, or double. Single is a shorter form of number than double, so that's why we're using that. And it's already determined that I'm going to do the same for the width and length of each room. It wants H1. We could, I guess I said length, so I could go len. We'll work that out. You can come back after you've added all of these variables and taken the data from the text box, which is entered as text, and convert it into the number format. So I'll be back when I've done all of. So here you can see I've got no errors in my code, and I've defined all the variables with width and length. So I can just say width room 1, length room 1, and so on, just so that any other programmer knows what my code means. I'm doing some internal documentation for you. And now we need our code for area. So for area, again, I need to define our variable. I'm going to call it float again for area. And I'm going to say area equals, and we're going to say, well, the area of our 4 rooms requires 4 mini calculations and adding them together. So we need width 1 times length 1. Well, it's actually doing it for us. It's pretty good, isn't it? We'll just use those. And then, of course, we need... Right, width 1 times length 1. I actually like breaking these formulas up completely. I know this should work, but I like breaking them up into the different rooms. Every time you use a formula, and if you're using a formula for a volume or something, you make sure that things like, I don't know, pi r cubed or whatever it happens to be, are all stretched out. So cube could be, if you're cubing your width, you'd go W1 times W2 times W1 times W1 times W1 for W1 cubed. Or you can use internal mathematics functions in your programming languages, but we're not doing that here. We're simply adding our 4 rooms and working them out. So we're getting width 4 times length 4, L4, and that should give us our area. So now we need to work out where the area is going. Now, if you recall, I didn't add a label to place our output into. I also haven't used our checkbox yet. So let's come back and do that. But here we've got total cost. So I'm going to put another label here where I can place our answer. So we had that as 14. I think I'm just going to have a couple of dots here just as a placeholder so that we know when we open the form that that's where the answer is going to be. And I had 14 point down there. So let's get that to be 14 point as well. Now I'm going to use that label. This label is label 10. So let's go back and fix that up. So here we are again. Now, we said that the tile cost was $112.40 and the carpet cost was $85.70. Now, that should be per square meter. So the area should be in per square meter. Area per square meter. Let's use a cube. Okay, so area is per square meter. Now, well, sorry, area in square meter is what I want to say. I'm losing plot a bit, but area in square meters. Now, here we're going to go and go, right, how much for the carpet and how much for the tiles? Now, we need to work out whether our checkbox is checked. So I'm going to use an if statement for that. So I'm going to go uh, if checkbox 1 if checkbox 1 is checked, if checkbox 1, it's not quite liking me. I'll just, and then I say dot checked. So we're doing if checkbox 1 checked is true. Just notice that you have to have the spelling correct for that. Then we're going to be doing our calculation. Now we know our calculation would, well, the total cost, which we're going to have a variable for, which will also be a flow. We can just use the word total for that. So total will equal area. We know that that is helpful. And we know that the checking of the checkbox is for tiles. So if the tiles are checked, it is the tile cost. So I don't have to say tile cost. I don't really need a variable for that because these are internally coded kind of numbers. And I'm going to write in 8570, which is what I had on my algorithm sheet. And then we'll finish that little calculation there. And we will then say that we will calculate tiles. So one of the things we're learning here with our code, or you're learning, is really about data types. We have text data types coming into floating point numbers, and we're using floating point numbers really for efficiency, but we have a bit of a problem because C# thinks that this number I've put in is a double number. Now there's a little trick we can do which will tell C# that this is in fact a floating point number. All we have to do is write F after the number. So let's do that. And you see the error disappear. Did you see what I did there? Just look at the error down there. Cannot implicitly convert type double to float, blah, 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 etc. So if I put the F there, you'll see that disappear. And so now I've worked out the total cost. So what I need to do then is to put that into that label 10. So I could do that here, but again, I might need to cast that back into that. We can see how we go there. So we'll go label 10 dot text equals, and it's been quite helpful here, it's gone total to string. So it wants me to again make our floating point number total into a string so it can put it in that text box as characters. So we'll accept that and say thank you for your helpful contribution. And now we can do an else. Oh, it's actually been helpful and done that for us too. Okay, so the else is required because, of course, if indeed we want to have, where's my other bracket? I'm missing one. So if we want to work out the carpet cost, we need a similar thing. So we need, okay, what about the carpet? Else it's going to be the carpet, so we'll simply have exactly the same code, except we're going to change the number. So I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit, copy that, put that down here, and we will say float error, except for a car. We've worked out that, ooh, in fact, I got it wrong originally. Our carpet was 85.70 and our carpet was tile was 112. So the carpet is 100, the tile is 112.40 and our so the tile cost is that and the carpet is 85.70. So there we go. Now I think we're right. But does it work? We'll better come back. So if we have a go at running it, you will see quite, I'm going to bring it across, quite an interesting thing. We have here room 1. Now our calculation, if you recall, if I went to over here and I clicked on our form, we see our calculation. Our calculation is assuming that there's a number here. We can't have nothing there or nothing here, nothing there, because if I do that, if I let it run, if I just put some numbers into room 1, for example, it'll be okay if I put numbers in all the rooms. You know, if I have 3 and I don't know, whatever number I want. But if I make errors, it's going to be a major problem. Let's say this is meters, check with tiles or not, customer name's Fred, and we calculate it. We have a good outcome there. If I check that it's tiles, we should get a different number, and it works. So our program works, but I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick. I would usually pre-fill these text boxes with zeros so that if you only had 2 rooms, for example, and you happen to type them into the middle ones, it should still calculate it without too much of a problem. And you can see there that it's working. So if we close that down, the way you would do that is simply to go into your form here and go into the .text property, text property, there we are. Text property is there. You can put noughts in all of your text boxes here, and I recommend you do that so that you pre-validate all of the text boxes, and that should stop your form from crashing, although if you use letters instead of numbers it will crash anyway. There is your carpet tile calculator. What we have not done is to change our carpet here into our tile picture. And we need to do that too when we check the checkbox. And I just did that quickly so that you can use similar code to what was in the slideshow, but here we've got picture box 1 image location, and you can simply give it the location of the file that you're trying to find on your system. So use the exact path, which you can find in Windows by clicking on your Explore window and simply finding your file, typing the file name at the end of it, using the double backslashes here. This, otherwise you'll find invalid escape sequences will be called. And here, and when you check if it is tiles, the tile will change, and if you want it to continue to change, you'd need to do the same thing for your carpet, bringing the carpet image down here so that when the checkbox is not checked, the image will change back to the carpet. But I'll leave you there. We've gone long enough and far enough today, hopefully for you to work out those tiny little changes that you might like to put into your program. There's the code. Copy that down, get your form working, and good luck with your programming. Thanks for watching another video of Computing with Dr. D, and we'll see you again next time.